The doctrine of discovery is the current system of laws and policies that justify the removal of land from indigenous peoples. These laws are rooted in church doctrines that originated in the 15th century.
Together, we will uncover this deep structure of colonization that systematically deprives indigenous peoples of human rights.
I'm Sheri Hostetler, and I hope to start a coalition of Anabaptist people of faith that seek to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. I'm also a Mennonite pastor in San Francisco.
And I'm Sarah Augustine, and I also helped start this coalition. As an activist and scholar, I'm the descendant of the Tewa people and a displaced person. This is the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery podcast.
Well, hello. We are happy to welcome to our podcast today Frances Loberg and Tracy Howe, and we're going to be talking about their really important accompaniment work at Oak Flat. So I'm going to introduce Frances first. Frances, or Fran Loberg, lives in the ancestral land of the Kalapuya Indians. Did I do that right, Fran?
You did.
Excellent. The ancestral land of the Kalapuya Indians, now known as Salem, Oregon. She has 3 grown children. She's a semi-retired lactation nurse, and she's been involved in various movements for peace and justice since her early 20s. Frances attends Salem Mennonite Church and is currently helping lead the adult Sunday school class through the study materials put out by the coalition, which I will link in the show notes. Mm-hmm. In July of 24, she attended a training to be a member of the COFA team. We're going to tell you what that acronym means soon. And then she accompanied the Apache Stronghold on their 6-week prayer journey across the country, visiting other tribes and churches to pray and build unity as they took their case to the Supreme Court on September 11th, 2024. So welcome, Frances.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's my great privilege to introduce Reverend Tracy Howe, who is a songwriter, author, theologian, and activist, and uses their creative expression and cultural organizing toward a world of beauty, care, and belonging. They are mixed Pinay, Filipino, and European settler living on Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui lands in what is now called Tucson, Arizona. Tracy was a frontline organizer in Charlottesville, Virginia, the summer of 2017, and continues to be deeply engaged in abolition work, anti-fascism, and organizing locally and nationally. Her songs have been used by faith communities and in movement work globally. Tracy serves as the team leader and Minister for Faith Education, Innovation, and Formation for the United Church of Christ National Ministries. She is a contributing author to Building Up a New World, Congregational Organizing for Transformative Impact, which is from Pilgrim Press in 2023. She is the founder of Restoration Village Arts, a 501c3, and they are pursuing a PhD in applied intercultural arts research at the University of Arizona, where she is a practice-led scholar exploring spirituality in 21st century U.S.-based social movements and the relationship between U.S. settler colonialism and present-day fascism. Tracy is raising a teenager and loves walking and snuggling with her 3 dogs. For someone who knows nothing about Oak Flat, friends, please give us a summary in your own words of what's happening and what's at stake at Oak Flat.
You want to try first, Fran, or you want me to go?
Whatever. Do you?
So there were several parts. What is Oak Flat? Oak Flat is a place. It is about 2 miles to the north of me here in what is known as Tucson, but it's also in the ancestral sacred lands of the Apache people going back thousands of years. It's a place for me where I would say, from in my Christian tradition and legacy, there's something called the transfiguration, where some of the disciples went up and they saw Jesus, but Jesus was having this conversation with Elijah and Moses, who go back, hundreds of years from Jesus, but they're all just present in this place together. And the disciples, they're so present that the disciples are like, I'm going to build you a house, so you can stay for a while, we can chat. And what I have come to know of Apache cosmology is that Oak Flat is like that. It's a place where they go that there is a divine presence and they're specific deities and spirit reside. And so it is there that they practice sacred ceremony. Oak Flat is also a struggle for a continued protection of Mother Earth, for land and water, for ecosystems, and for the human and more than human world. So the last part that I heard, Sarah, was what's at stake at Oak Flat. And I think it is no less than the existence of life. And our capacity to know, remember, and experience what it means to be human in this world and connected to the human and more than human.
Thank you, Tracy. I sure appreciate that. And Fran, I wonder if you'd be willing to say, just for somebody who has never heard of Oak Flat, would you be willing to talk a little bit about what's happening there, and why is there conflict, and what are the details of what's happening at Oak Flat?
Yeah, well, Tracy did a beautiful job of talking about what it is. I've also heard Apache Stronghold people talk about it's where their ancestors lived freely, where they collect food and medicines, where they drink from the springs, where they gather for sacred ceremonies, and where they have their closest connection to God. And one of the things that happened was that back in sometime back, copper was discovered under Oak Flat. And for 10 years, there was a copper mining company who attempted to get Congress to give that land to them to mine. And the Apache Indians have treaty rights to access to that land. It's not on the reservation, but they have access to it for ever, for perpetuity. And for 10 years, the Congress said no to the copper mining company. The mine that they want to build would sink a crater about 2 miles in diameter. And I remember the depth of the Eiffel Tower. I can't remember how far that is.
1,000 feet deep.
1,000 feet deep. And it would destroy the land, and it would be another removal of native peoples from their lifeways, from their land, and from what their ancestral traditions. And in, I think it was 2014, John McCain put a rider bill on a must-pass defense bill to give that land to Resolution Copper. There are two mining companies associated with Resolution Copper. And there would be an environmental statement that would be required, an environmental impact statement. However, the land would transfer regardless. And so the environmental laws would be null and void in this case. And the Apache Stronghold, which is a group of Indians who are from the San Carlos tribe, have joined together to fight the United States and having given that copper mine. It was, the bill was passed, the rider was put on very shortly before the voting, and so it was passed in 2014. And the Apache Stronghold has been fighting the transfer of the land in the courts, and in September they took their case to the Supreme Court. And they're waiting to hear. We are all waiting to hear whether or not the Supreme Court is going to take that case.
Thank you, Fran. That was also very good, concise history. I think if it's okay to add, I would say before John McCain slid that rider in, it was just kind of like basic advocacy, appealing to moral conscience that was keeping it back. And there were a number of bills that were denied, as Fran mentioned, just based on people's concepts of right and wrong, and shouldn't do this. And there's so many reasons why not. Because of how the land transfer happened legislatively, Apache Stronghold had to shift their tactics, and so they're fighting it on religious freedom grounds.
Right.
And it's actually never been done where an indigenous group has sought to claim land based on religious freedom, because this isn't a case where, oh, your temple or your church, we need this space, so go rebuild it like 2 blocks away. This is not the same thing. Their religion and the expression of their culture, and as Fran put it, their lifeways is intimately tied to this specific land.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those really um, great summaries of what's at stake here. So I feel like Tracy, you kind of maybe began to allude to this, as did you, Fran. But could you say more about what is the role of prayer in this campaign?
Um, I've heard many times from Winslow Nosy and from other Apaches and his granddaughters that prayer is their strongest weapon. And my experience going on the 6-week prayer journey was that we prayed everywhere we went, and that was their strategy. We weren't out protesting, we weren't out doing other things. It was a prayer journey, and everybody back and forth shared um, their stories, their struggles for land, and there was prayer that was had with everybody that we visited. Mostly other tribes in the West, and mostly churches in the East. And there was a staff with 5 eagle feathers on it that was we had morning prayer every day at dawn. And the staff was there, and we blessed the feathers. And the staff was at every gathering and ceremony that we had, and it was placed in we came in with drums and singing, and the drums were placed in a circle, and the staff was in the middle, and this staff with these feathers listened and took in all of our prayers, all of our stories of both the people we visited and of the Apache stronghold. And when we got to the Supreme Court, there was one of those feathers that held all of our prayers, all of our stories. And it was for the lawyer to take into the Supreme Court. And when he got in there, he shook the feather and released all of our stories, all of our prayers into the halls of the Supreme Court. And so prayer was a central focus of what the Apache Stronghold is doing. And it was really interesting to me because in Mennonite circles, we talk about nonviolence as our strategy. And really, this was a nonviolent action in in all of its embodiment. In that we were praying in everything we did.
I think also people who are invited into prayer, like non-native people who don't have that experience, who um, don't have access to those kind of cultural, spiritual um, um, pieces that carry that power to move the prayer between. Um, we are invited to pray from our own tradition as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much, it's clear when we're invited that is the primary task. And so for me, considering what is prayer and understanding that prayer practices vary greatly between people and traditions, I've really come to understand it in this campaign, the role of prayer in this campaign as presence. That presence is the most powerful thing we have to offer one another, and that as we pray, we are present, offering our full selves, um, both in person and those who pray from afar. We give our complete attention and selves to this work and this journey.
Thank you. I have, I don't know that I have been involved with a social movement, if that's the word for this, that has been so enveloped in prayer, which I really experienced when I went to Oak Flat myself. So thank you for lifting up that role of prayer.
I wonder if each of you would be willing to share with us and with our listeners your own story. What attracted you to become involved in this movement at Oak Flat?
So for me, I moved to Tucson in the summer of 2019. And as Fran mentioned, this has been a struggle that, it's going back over 2 decades now. And as part of this campaign, there's been different events like the annual Oak Flat Run that actually just happened again last weekend. Here we're recording this towards the end of February, but so I would see signs, and I started to see things and local advocacy all over when I got here. I didn't know about Oak Flat prior to arriving here. But I'm involved in a lot of different organizing spaces. And so I just kind of assumed eventually I would get involved, but just wanted to learn the landscape and relationships and see how that might happen. And for me, two things actually compelled me then to jump in. One was learning more of the history of the land and people and cultures here. When I moved here, the Apache people, they never surrendered, and so they were the last holdouts in what U.S. military archives calls the Indian Wars. But we still see, Cochise Stronghold and the Chiricahua Mountains, and learning all these places of where folks evaded this militarized colonization was was really powerful to me. And then to learn that they were treated as like prisoners of war afterwards. I can't rank the suffering and violence put upon Native people, but it is significant to say they were put in a prisoner of war kind of detention camp. Um, so part of that is just wanting to know like where I'm at and what the continuing work is against the violences of colonization. I find, I think Indigenous resurgence is just an incredibly hopeful thing in the crises that we're facing right now. So I consider it a great privilege that I live in an area with a visible surviving Native community. We have a good numbers of the O'odham people and Apache people. But what really then finally was the last kicker was that I was involved in the Stop Cop City movement in Atlanta in the Wilani Forest, and the indigenous folks there were drawing connections in new ways between the colonization of the land, the establishment of prisons and capitalism and the failure of democracy. They're in the relationship. You could see it all like this kind of this like very evil transfiguration in the struggle to save Wilani Forest there, where the proposed site for Cop City is. And as I was a part of this, I started to understand how important it was to be just in processes here where I was living. And so that was kind of the last kicker to just jump in here in Tucson. And I'm so glad I did.
Thank you, Tracy. How about you, Fran?
Um, I've been involved in a number of different civil rights and social justice movements in my life, but I had never focused on Native Americans. And I started a few years ago. I am involved with Ched Myers and Elaine Enns, and joined classes and started learning from their book, Healing Haunted Histories. And that's kind of what drew me in the first place. And then I led a study of that group in my home church. We have a group called Sacred Circle, and they were interested. And so I led that. And then from that, I was asked to help teach the adult Sunday school class. And so we started looking at the study materials from the coalition. And we've spent the last year on those study materials. And last summer, well, as I'm studying, I'm learning all this stuff from Healing Home and the coalition materials. And I thought, but I want to have connection. I don't want to just learn this in my head. Um, I want to find places to connect. And I've gone up to Elahe with Randy and Edith Woodley a couple of times to help them out when they're doing schools. And then when I heard about the training for COFA, for the accompaniment project, I thought, well, okay, I want to do that. Thinking that maybe I would have more connection. And then I went to the training and found myself 2 weeks later on a 6-week prayer journey with the Apache Strong.
Wow.
And it was just, it's like my head spins sometimes when I think about all that I learned last summer and all that I experienced. And one of those formative journeys for me. And so that's how I got here, and really blessed. And I found myself on that journey, wanted to pinch myself, like, am I really here? How did I get here? And yet my kids would tell me, Mom, you've been preparing for this your whole life. So that's how I got here, and I'm really, really thankful.
And Fran just anchored that whole prayer journey, and it was just really wonderful. And it's been a beautiful thing just to see her continued commitment to everything. And
Thank you.
I got to hear Fran because Apache Stronghold would occasionally invite the non-native people that were accompanying them to speak at the prayer gathering. So I got to hear Fran speak when they stopped in Tucson, and it was really lovely.
Thank you. It was scary, but it came off.
So here's the promised definition of the acronym COFA. Can you say what COFA is? I mean, literally what that acronym means, but then also what does COFA do? Um, and just for folks to know, COFA is a working group of the coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. And yeah, just say more.
Sure. The C stands for the indigenous name of Oak Flat. I am not a native Apache speaker, nor do I have a sense of the nuance of the different articulations of things. So I've seen this word spelled out. I've heard it very, very many times. I'm going to humbly offer it here so that people get a sense. Chí'chil Biłdagoteel. Oak Flat Accompaniment is what COFA stands for. Fran, you want to say what it is, the working group?
Yeah. When about 4 years ago, Winsler moved to Oak Flat. He has space in a campground, and his family was really worried about him because, as you know, this stronghold is fighting a multi-billion-dollar corporation and a lot of local miners. And so the coalition started this accompaniment project to accompany Winsler and the Apache stronghold, and also to accompany the land of Oak Flat, because the land itself was not always being treated well. And so I would say it's a prayerful, protective accompaniment. believing in the power of prayer, of being there, and also the importance of having a witness from the outside of the immediate community is part of our role. And we also endeavor to accompany Winsler, in particular in Oak Flat, but also wherever he goes. And so we had a team of people in, part of it, the accompaniment on the journey, the prayer journey, was part of that. But also we had a team of people when he was in Goshen, Indiana, for a week. And we're just ongoing of following. If he's going somewhere and needs accompaniment, then we're trying to be there for that. So it's for Winsler, for all of the Apache stronghold, and for the Oak Flat land itself. Prayerful, protective accompaniment.
So, if one of our listeners is listening to this and is feeling like they might be called to this kind of accompaniment work, how can they start? What would be the first step for them?
So, in the process of discernment, I would recommend joining a coalition call with the Oak Flat group to learn more about it. Then the coalition has a beautiful orientation that really helps center COFA as well in terms of commitment to following Indigenous leadership, understanding, just basic power dynamics, how we're entering in and our basic kind of posture and working there. And then from there, COFA offers training. Right now, it's been 2 times a year, and that training is in person for several days, and then generally also includes time on the land and interaction with Apache Stronghold. And then there's a mutual discernment of if this is a good fit or not. And if it's not, there's lots of ways to be involved. It doesn't have to be with direct prayerful protective accompaniment on the land, because it is quite a commitment. We ask folks to come out a week at a time, and just camp, just rough camp on Oak Flat and be available. So that is not accessible to everyone. It is also, there's other ways to be involved. So the coalition working group also is working on the fight for another sacred site, very very in close proximity to Oak Flat. The settler name for it is Mount Graham. And there was an observatory built a number of years ago, and so the struggle is still to reclaim that land exclusively for Apache ceremony and the practice of their religion and culture. There's also different aspects of advocacy and opportunities that have come up. For example, in this effort to um, put advocate to save Oak Flat, there was, a financial action taken where people did education around how different investment firms supported the mining company that was going for Oak Flat and then encouraged divestment. During when the Supreme Court case was filed, there was an opportunity for folks and organizations and churches to sign on and write amicus briefs. And so a number of those were collected and filed with the Supreme Court as well. So there's kind of different ongoing things emerging. I'm sure that as a part of this podcast, people start to learn a little bit more about the coalition and that it's a 100-year vision. So there's a lot of pieces and a lot of a lot of places for people to come in. But maybe that is a first good starting place.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. And I want to just uh, say here that we can drop our calendar in the chat or in the show notes. We'll include it. That is the calendar of the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, with instructions for how to sign up to go to an orientation, which is something that Tracy described, and how to get connected to the COFA working group, where we really are so thrilled and excited to be part of this work with the many people, volunteers, and amazing, just amazing kin that have come together around this work. And I'm so grateful to you, Tracy, and so grateful to you, Fran. We will include the things that you described in our show notes as well.
Yes, thank you so much. You've been really powerful spokespeople for this important work, and I'm grateful that you've been here with us today.
And
Thank you
so
so much
grateful
for
for
this
the work you're
opportunity.
doing. Sorry to interrupt you, Tracy.
Yeah, no worries. I just want to thank you for this opportunity as well, and to see how connected each piece is, and how so much of it in my experience is being faithful to what is before you. You know, Fran, you reflecting on how did I get here, and sleeping on a cot every night with with a bunch of people and Apache and non-native folks on this like national prayer journey. And I think you're just being faithful to the next
Yeah.
thing. And I think about your book that you co-wrote, Sheri and Sarah, and then the one you brought out that I'm excited to read next, "The Land Is Not Empty," and how those have also served to bring many people into this work that really began before we were born and will go on after we die, but that we must be
Yes.
faithful to in the now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, may many more Fran and Tracy's arise from the listeners of this podcast. So,
Well, I am so thankful just to be a part of this group at this point. What a blessing you all are to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. This podcast is hosted by us, co-produced by the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery and Anabaptist World.
the opinions expressed here are ours, however, and do not reflect official positions of Anabaptist World.
For more information, go to anabaptistworld.org and dismantlediscovery.org.
Our theme music is by Micah Peplow and Shannon Kaler. Thank you.